We're back, and we have Dr. Christine Horner with us. And one of the diseases that's very prevalent in my family is diabetes. Also kidney disease, which diabetes can lead into kidney disease. And I'm one of maybe the fortunate ones that has hypoglycemia. But that's dangerous too.
Yes.
If you do not take care of yourself, if you don't eat right, if you don't eat those little small meals in between, you can pass out. Lots of things can happen. So let's talk about diabetes and how can we prevent it or help it, especially if it's prevalent in your family.
Sure. So, there's actually several different forms of diabetes. So, type 1, we used to call juvenile diabetes, but that can be genetic, or we think maybe it might be infectious, where we sometimes see this happen in kids. And so type 1 is actually where there's injury to the pancreatic cells that produce insulin, the beta cells, and so it doesn't produce insulin. That's only 10% of the cases of diabetes. The vast majority, so over 90% of people have type 2 diabetes, which generally comes from diet and lifestyle, eating too much, not working out enough, or moving your body enough, eating sugar, carbs, eating too much. So most of the people are overweight, and it comes from eating too many calories, where your cells become resistant to insulin.
Right.
So then your pancreas has to start cranking out more and more insulin to kind of keep up to make it function. And so in those people, we see high insulin levels, whereas in type 1, they have low insulin levels because their pancreas isn't making it. Now, the good news about type 2 is that it's almost always reversible. And if you lose weight and just a little bit of it, it can make a really significant difference. And kind of on that same vein, they found that if people gain weight, like just even a little bit of weight, it can significantly increase your risk of getting diabetes. And if you're obese, your risk goes up by 60 times. So there's a huge association with that.
Right.
Now, if you lose weight, change your diet and so forth, usually your body's extremely responsive, and you can actually, have your disease go away, so it's a non-issue. And diabetes is really a difficult disease because it causes so many problems in the body. It's just not a sugar issue. I mean, we'll see things where people they have circulation problems, and they have to have amputations, they have kidney diseases, they can have blindness. I mean, this is something that you really don't, want to mess around with. Now, one interesting fact is that we found vitamin D3 here, which is, vitamin, but with the research, what we've discovered is that it acts in the body much more like a hormone. And this hormones are where they're in little small dosages, and it really affects all of the body. So they found that people who are low in vitamin D, and 80% of people in the United States are considered low in vitamin D, they have a much higher incidence of diabetes. If you start taking supplemental vitamin D and get your levels up to the therapeutic range, which ideally, I'll say the range they say is to be over 30. Those of us that are kind of natural health experts say, no, you really want to be in the 40 to kind of 60 range. But what they found is that it's almost like this linear relationship between the amount of vitamin D that you have in your blood and what your risk of diabetes is.
Right.
So overall, they say that if you have therapeutic doses in your blood, you have a 47% reduction in your incidence of diabetes. And there was a study that came out last week that showed if you get your levels up to 50 or greater, it could reduce your risk by 80%.
Wow, that's
just taking,
wonderful.
Just taking vitamin D. Now, the most important thing is that you have to know what your levels are because everybody metabolizes vitamin D kind of differently, and certain people need 2,000 international units is kind of a standard, minimal dose. And then sometimes we'll find that people will need up to 5,000 or even higher than that because they don't absorb it as well or they don't use it as well. So you can either go to your doctor and get your levels checked. If you don't want to go to your doctor and get your levels checked, you can actually go to a website called nutrientpower.org.
Nutrientpowers.org.
Nutrientpower.org. And you can order this kit from the website. And they have vitamin D kits, and they have a combination with omega-3 fatty acids because that's another nutrient that's just absolutely essential for our health. And so what they're doing, I mean, I really love this organization. It's a 501c3, and they're really dedicated to doing research. So they're doing this international data collection on vitamin D levels and the incidence of disease, as well as omega-3 fatty acid levels and the incidence of disease, so that we have a clearer understanding of, what the relationships are. So you're entered into that international study when you order from nutrientpower.org. And then that website also has a lot of additional information on there too, about the vitamin Ds and the omega-3s and their effect on health. So it's a good resource, for you to look. But, to me, it's like, okay, all I have to do is take vitamin D and I can reduce my risk by 80%. That's pretty darn good, right?
Right. But diet has a lot to do with diabetes
It's huge.
as well.
I mean, as with all things, but I mean, that's absolutely huge. You really don't want to have any sugar, in your diet. And exercise, I mean, it's really fascinating for people that are diabetic and they're checking their blood sugar levels and so forth. If you get up, let's say that you're discovered that your blood sugar levels are really high, and you get up and you just walk around the block, you'll watch those blood sugar levels just come down.
Right.
So, again, the human body is incredibly responsive. You just know how to take care of it.
That's right. That's right.
And it doesn't have to be a full-time job.
But what I've seen, when I went away, when we lived overseas, Dr. Horner, our diet was so different, especially in Turkey, which was a Mediterranean type diet. And I was walking, I was exercising with a personal trainer, and I felt great all the time because you're actually forced into some of the stuff that you do. But I love the Mediterranean diet because it's really a lot of plant. It's a lot of yogurts. It's a lot of things that we don't necessarily have in our diets. What I see in a lot of yogurts, which they call yogurts here, is a lot of sugar.
Okay, yeah.
It's a lot of sugar, not a lot of real, what I call yogurt. I make a lot of different things that vegans and vegetarians like, because if you really want to be healthy, you really want to kind of really tend to be like that more so. So when I do a stir fry, I don't do it for very long because I want it to be crisp. And that's the thing. The key is learning what to eat also, especially if you're diabetic. So I do a lot of shows, by the way, for diabetics. And I also work with a company called Next Stage. That's it does all of the dialysis machines. But it's teaching kidney disease or kidney patients and also dialysis patients what they should be looking at nutrient-wise as well, because that's really important, I think.
Right, yeah.
True?
Yeah, it's very important. And unfortunately, most doctors have absolutely no education in it. And like I said, in my medical school training, I didn't have a single course in nutrition. 20 years later, I went back to my medical school and asked the medical students where I was lecturing, do you have a course in nutrition?
They didn't.
No. So, like I said, I didn't learn anything about health.
Right.
And all that training. But once I got out and started learning I learned the system of medicine called Ayurveda, which is the traditional system of medicine from India that Deepak Chopra talks about. And that's when I learned about how to be healthy.
Do you do neurointegration?
I do everything.
Oh, good. That's good. Reflexology, neurointegration. And I think neurointegration is a wonderful, wonderful modality along with reflexology. And so anyhow, before we go to break, please give your books out that you've written, and also your website, please.
Sure, yeah. So my website is drchristinehorner.com. That's drchristinehorner.com. And I've written 2 award-winning books. The first one is called Waking the Warrior Goddess, Dr. Kathryn Horner's Program to Protect Against and Fight Breast Cancer. And my most recent book, which is Radiant Health, Ageless Beauty. And it's a guide really to help you with extraordinary health and longevity.
Okay. And we'll be right back on our show. Thank you. We're back with Dr. Kathryn Horner, and the discussion is really your health and wellness, actually. But we're going to be talking about something that has come up over the last few years. It's become epidemic in our country, and that is sleep apnea. Let's talk about sleep apnea and how we can find out if we have it, what we can do to help it. And what's the latest science on it? Let's find out. Okay.
So, like with all things, everything we've been talking about, from smoking, drinking, being overweight, these are all the things that would increase your risk of developing sleep apnea. And so some people may not know what that is, but oftentimes we think about it as being a fat man's disease where there's a lot of snoring. And it's true that being overweight increases your risk of sleep apnea. But it's not just snoring. It's actually when you stop breathing for several seconds. So, if you have a partner, that partner can go, oh my God, you stop breathing, for a few seconds. So that's the way you can find out about it. If you're single, obviously you wouldn't know that. You'd have to go in and to do a
sleep study.
A sleep study in the laboratory. Now, women oftentimes don't snore and can have sleep apnea. And so the symptoms that they can experience then is that in the morning they may feel kind of have vague headaches and a lot of lack of energy and daytime sleepiness and that kind of thing. So, but it's extremely prevalent. I mean, it's another one where we think about 50% of people, may have some degree to it. And 90% of those people don't know that they have it. And the problem with it is that they've actually found that people who have sleep apnea, it will increase your risk of developing heart disease, and it can also increase your risk of having diabetes. It's interesting how they all kind of weave, together, isn't it?
Right.
So to lower your risk or to help you to recover from it is the same thing as everything else too. So losing weight, can have a big effect. Not eating heavy meals too late at night. I mean, most people have experienced that where you eat too late at night and then you just can't sleep very well. But, you're trying to digest rather than sleep. So that, causes a real problem. I mean, taking sleep medications and drinking too much, before you go to bed, that, can really, increase the risk of it. So, again, it's just not exercising, the normal things. So you want to, again, have the healthiest diet and lifestyle that you can. If you have extra pounds, you want to get rid of those. Definitely encourage people to go to a sleep lab so that they can get properly diagnosed with it. And they, so there's a variety of different techniques that you can help to kind of open your airways. So it's called, most people have what's called obstructive sleep apnea. And what that means is the soft tissues in the palate are obstructing that airflow.
Right.
So by doing some simple mechanics as far as sleeping on a wedge, they found that actually sleeping on your left side, is something that can be beneficial. And then more sophisticated kind of medical thing that they can do is to fit you with this machine called a CPAP machine. CPAP stands for continuous airway pressure. And so that keeps those airways open, at night and gets the oxygen in so that you don't, get into that state where it's going to increase your risk of the other diseases.
I'd like to know, there's some new pillows that are out there, and we're not giving any commercials out here, but there's also some devices that you can wear in your mouth that can actually open your airwaves out. You hear about it all the time. Do they work?
Well, they can, or even those nasal strips, that they make too. So those things can help. Right. But, I definitely recommend that you go to that sleep lab so they can determine, what, if anything, that you should be using.
Problem. Right.
Well, to see what the problem is, and then, you could be using those strips and they're not strong enough for you, so you wouldn't know because you're asleep, sort of.
Well, I'm awake.
You're
He's
awake.
not asleep, but I'm awake.
That's right.
So you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell.
So it's important to at least get diagnosed and then know what you need to do as far as the proper treatment. And then at the same time, really encourage you to take on doing all those diet and lifestyle changes because you can cause it to go away.
Right. So let's sum up everything.
Sure.
Because we've talked about lots of different ones that cause the no symptoms.
Right. No symptoms
to these deadly diseases.
Yes.
And is it hereditary as well? Can that play a part in it?
Well, for almost everything, there's some element of heredity, but it's always very small.
Okay.
So we'll say, it's just my genes, like in breast cancer, for instance. It's usually at the most 5% is what we think.
Right.
And even if you have a genetic predisposition for something, we've now discovered after we did the mapping of the human genome we used to think that, DNA was just the static molecule that gave the instructions,
Right.
for our anatomy and our physiology, and it didn't change. Well, now what we know, since we mapped out all the genes and we're analyzing them and so forth, is that our genes are constantly changing, and it has to do with our emotions, the foods we eat, everything that we come in contact and even feel. They release little chemicals that will hook onto our DNA and will activate genes, turning certain genes on and turning certain genes off. So it's this whole area of study called epigenetics. And so what we now say is that, it pretty much doesn't matter what genes you were born with, because you can override those genes based on what your diet and lifestyle is. So you're turning off those negative kind of cancer-promoting genes or ill health-promoting genes and turning on the ones that help to promote health. So to me, that's good news, because we have way more power over our health than we ever thought that we did.
Right, and we're living longer if we're smart.
If we're smart, that's right.
We're smart.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm seeing people living, and you are too, to 115. It's not, and it's going to be a new norm. Like we have talked many times that we talked when I first met you, and that's at least maybe 15 years ago, that we would live to 150. And I see that happening because we're becoming smarter about our health.
Some people are.
Some people are, and some people aren't. But I think, a lot of it had to do with knowing what prevents it.
Sure.
Education.
Right.
Knowing what foods cause certain things. What happens when you change your diet to become a vegetarian or a vegan? What happens then? I think those are things that are important. If you understand that kind of stuff and you actually train your family members, or you encourage them, or you teach them how to cook, right? Or what can you do? I wake up in the morning and have a wonderful shake, and usually it's got a little bit of fruit in it. I've noticed that if I don't have a banana in the morning, or I don't have a banana within the thing, or I don't have enough potassium in my system, then you get leg cramps terribly. Okay? There's certain things that we lack, like magnesium.
Right, magnesium's huge.
It's important that we have that in our system.
Yes.
I believe I have a real hard time with pills. So I've gone to ones that dissolve in water, like Palm, or other ones that are easier for me to digest. So there's things out there for you, right?
Well, in your smoothie too, it's just I think you can open capsules and throw things in, and so I do all the things with superfoods, so you can kind of do concentrated nutrients in your diet rather than empty calories. And again, it's not just food. A lot of times we just concentrate on food, but there's so many different aspects that affect our health, and so that's why it's so important. And again, plug my book here, because it tells you all the different elements that are so critically important to have extraordinary health and longevity. And if you have the best diet in the world, but you're staying up late at night and smoking and stressed out, you're not going to be healthy. So each of these things are equally important. And,
they all work together as a team effort, right?
Yeah.
Even though if I may stay up late, I sleep longer.
That doesn't necessarily help.
Well, here's the deal. If your body is on a map, or whatever you want to call it, if your body
on your circadian rhythm clock.
Well, I am a night person. I'm sorry. But then I sleep later in the morning.
So I could just tell you that what the research shows.
You should go to bed early. Right.
You got to go to bed before 10 o'clock.
Oh, my gosh.
And get up before 6 o'clock. And this is what Ayurveda said 5,000 years ago. Research absolutely determines that this is true. It all has to do with hormonal fluctuations throughout the day and throughout the night.
Right.
So if you watch like our cortisol levels or insulin levels, and not just estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, there's melatonin or sleep hormone. So all of these things elevate and decrease along in the circadian rhythm. If you go to bed before 10 o'clock, those hormonal fluctuations are optimal. If you go to bed after 10 o'clock, they're not. And melatonin...
Let me ask you a question. Do you go to bed...
about 8:30, 9 o'clock.
8:30, 9 o'clock, and up at 5:30?
Sometimes earlier even, too.
Even earlier.
Yeah.
I know. I have a lot of friends that are like that.
Yeah. And you have more energy is a thing too. If you sleep in later, you usually find that you feel more sluggish.
No.
And that all has to do with these, circulating hormones. So if you stay up late, it flattens your melatonin curve.
Okay.
Because it peaks between midnight and 2 a.m. And if you miss that peak, you don't get it back. If you sleep later, it still is flattened. And so melatonin is not just a sleep hormone, but it's also a very powerful antioxidant. It regulates estrogen levels. It influences our immune system. And so they find that people who stay up to midnight on a regular basis, they have twice the incidence of heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and certain cancers like breast and
What do
prostate
you do
cancer.
with somebody that works at night?
That's a real problem.
Yeah.
So I think that I recommend that people take supplemental melatonin. And for the most part, we think that it's safe to take that, long term. We really haven't seen any side effects with it, but that's not good for your health.
Right.
Yeah.
And on that note, we need to end the show.
Okay.
If you would give your website, we want to thank you so much
Sure.
for really educating us on how to stay healthy, how to live longer, how to have a stress-free life. Would you give the name of your book and your website?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So my website is drchristinehorner.com. That's drchristinehorner.com. And my most recent book is called Radiant Health Ageless Beauty, and it's available everywhere, Amazon.com, Barnes & Nobles, and if you want an autographed copy, you can get it from my website.
That's great. And thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you again for
you're
coming.
welcome. My
All
pleasure.
right. Thank you. And we'll be back next time on Let's Just Talk. Don't forget to go to our website at KathrynRaaker.com. See you soon.